Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to our coffee times to talk about horror. And today I bring you my April wrap up. We're here to talk about all the books that I read for old school April.
It's coffee time.
Now, April went by like a weekend, like all the week goes slow, and then the weekend comes and it just passes in the blink of an eye. That's how I felt the month of April was for me. And I think it's because I went to Spain twice this year, once in February, once in March, almost back to back. And that meant that I had a lot of accumulated things to do in the house and work, and April has been the month where I have tried to catch up with all of it, and it has been quite exhausting. We are also renovating the attic, which it is at the moment 3 rooms. We're gonna turn them into 2, and we're gonna get new windows and everything. They're coming next week already to fix it, and I need to empty my whole office. So everything is empty now except of my office, and I have to empty my office throughout the week. So it's just a very busy time. However, I did manage to read 8 things for the month of April, and now I am so glad of past me that thought ahead and put in her TBR books that were short, because honestly, that is what I really needed in the month of April, because April, I struggled to finish my TBR, and at least with the 8 books that I did read, and which were not that long, it allowed me to get so many points for my team. I almost hit all of the different challenges, so I'm really excited because I did manage to get a lot of points even though I didn't read as much as I hoped. Anyways, today we're going to talk about the 8 books that I did manage to read for old school April. And if you're new here, welcome to the coffee family. I like to rate my books with coffee mugs, and I like to start with the lowest rating, so we always end up on a positive note. With that being said, let's kick started. Let's start with Ghostwriter by Edgar J. Hyde, and this is part of the Creepers book series, and I picked this one up because you had to read a book that was a Goosebumps knockoff, and I have been collecting some of these books and I never read them, so I thought now would be the perfect time. Unfortunately, this one was not as good as I had anticipated. It did not hit the spot at all, and I was a little bit sad about it. I think if I compare it to other similar middle grade stories, this one is definitely lacking in a lot of things, so that's why I didn't love it as much as I had hoped. We follow 3 siblings, Charlie, Kat, and Neil, and they move with their family. They relocate to a bigger house in the same town, and when they get to the new house, Charlie is, as always, writing his book, and he's doing entries in his book every day, and one day he realizes that there is a new entry in his notebook, but he is not the one that wrote it. So who wrote in his notebook? Somebody is kind of expanding his story without his knowledge. So that is a mystery to solve, who is writing in Charlie's notebook, and the siblings are gonna help him try to figure it out and try to find out who is this ghost and what does the ghost want from Charlie. I think my biggest problem with the book is that even though it's short, because it's obviously a fast middle grade book, it felt repetitive and the story was lacking any flavor whatsoever. I felt like it was just very bland. It didn't have anything special, anything that really hooked me. And of course you can read this very quickly because it is a fast book to read, and I think maybe for kids it's going to be a nice book, but for me it just didn't, get to the standards of other Goosebumps books or other middle grade books that I have read. Next we have to talk about The Lamb by Lucy Rose. I listened to this one on audiobook, and I decided to listen to this one because it felt like the type of book that I would probably consume best in audio, and I have to say I did enjoy the experience of the audiobook for this one, and I might be a little bit in the minority here because I didn't love this book as much as I had hoped. When I started reading this book, I got really invested, especially in the dynamic between the mother and the daughter and their very awful, toxic relationship. It was horrifying, and it is a very tragic story at the end of the day, even though this is horror, because Margot's story, the daughter's story, is quite horrifying. Margot and Mama live in the woods in a cottage, and when Margot is not at school, she spends quiet time with her mom, and they spend the days waiting for strangers to knock at their door. Her mom calls them strays, and strays for them are people they invite into their home because they are stranded, they are lost, and they feed them nice foods, they give them wine because they want to keep them happy. Mama says that happy people taste the best. So obviously when you go into the book, you know that this is a book about cannibals. And what I was really excited to see was the relationship between the mother and the daughter, and try to figure out why they became cannibals. Why are they picking these people? And even though I got some of the answers, I feel like I didn't get all of them. The whole concept of the book is nothing new, but the relationship between the mother and the daughter, it is quite unique, even though it's really, really awful. And I would say that's what sets this book apart. However, as invested as I was in these two characters, I felt the book started to get really repetitive. There was a lot of things that were felt the same, felt that I was listening to the same thing over and over again, the same procedures, the same stories, the same reasonings. The word stray was mentioned so much, really a lot of times. So towards the middle, I was kind of losing the interest in the book. In my opinion, this is one of the stories that could have potentially benefited being a novella, being a little bit shorter, because I think then the whole story and the whole ending would have had more of an impact. The ending was absolutely devastating, but I really, really enjoyed it. It was very dark, very gruesome. It's an ending that you kind of see coming, but you're also kind of hoping that it's not gonna happen. If you enjoy visceral stories about cannibals and you don't mind to read over and over again about preparing meat for consumption, human meat in this case, I would really recommend this book, but keep in mind that a lot of the things that happen might be a little bit repetitive, but I think for a one read for me, it was an interesting experience. I do like the character of Margot, and I liked to see her talk to the reader because we listen to the story from her perspective. And like I said, the ending is quite devastating, but I did enjoy it overall. I just didn't love it as much as I had hoped. Next we have my Goosebumps book pick for Old School April. Every year we have to read a Goosebumps book, and this year I picked this one because it has one of my favorite covers, and it's called My Best Friend is Invisible. Now when I went into the book, I legit thought that it was going to be a kid that has an invisible friend, but it's not quite like the story goes. The story was a little bit darker than I had anticipated, and I think that's why I enjoyed this one a lot. We follow Sammy, and Sammy one day realizes that there seems to be a presence, a spirit, a ghost in his room. Things are moving, and the spirit can move throughout the house, and he tells the parents, but obviously nobody believes him because duh, it's invisible, nobody can see it. And also the parents are scientists, so they don't believe in anything related to the supernatural and ghosts and all of that, and they think that Sammy is just, looking for attention. How is Sammy going to prove to his parents and his friends that he is not lying? And also, who is this ghost and what does this ghost want from him? This one was dark, it was funny, it was entertaining, it had a twisty ending, and I think this one is a lot of fun, so I did really enjoy this Goosebumps book. I still have a long way to go to read all of the Goosebumps books, but so far the ones that I have read have been a good experience. Next we have Bury Me Deep by Christopher Pike, and this one has been one of my favorite YA Christopher Pike books that I have read, and I think part of it was because the characters in this book are really well fleshed out. The story is a little bit more intricate, it has a little bit more depth, and I think it had a lot of other qualities that other YA books by him don't have. Jean is traveling to Hawaii to meet two of her besties to have 2 wonderful holiday weeks there. However, when she's in the plane on the way to Hawaii, something gruesome happens. One of the passengers in the plane mysteriously dies, and she has not been able to shake this off. Since it happened, it's been following her to the point where she has nightmares. But when she gets to Hawaii, she meets her friends and they want to go scuba diving. She agrees and she's trying to make the best out of it and try to, put the incident in the plane behind her. However, things are starting to point to secrets and truths that are being revealed, and they all seem to be related to Mike, the guy that died in the plane. So I think this book, even though you can kind of predict who is the evil person in the book and kind of what happened when the moment comes. I think it is really well done. It has a couple of twists and turns to the story. It is a really well developed story. There's a lot of creepiness in it as well. There's a lot of underwater action-packed scenes, and those really get to me because if there's something that I don't want to do is go deep underwater at the bottom of the sea, you will never find me there. I find that very claustrophobic, so those scenes really work for me as well. So Jean is gonna have to figure out who was actually Mike, what actually happened to him, and who she can trust. I think this book was great. I would reread it, and it's been one of my favorites by Christopher Pike so far. Next we have Fiends by Richard Lehman, and my stupid ass didn't know that this book is actually one novella and 12 short stories. I thought this was just one story, and I was not aware of that. So imagine my surprise when I was reading the novella, which is the first thing that comes, and then it just stopped and I was like, oh, so we're done. And then the short stories started. And honestly, it was not an unpleasant surprise, but it kind of took me off guard because that's not what I was anticipating. I think part of it is because the back of the book only talks about that novella and it doesn't specify that there is other stories in it. So to be fair, they fooled me. It's false advertisement. Now, I am not the biggest fan of short horror stories. I think there's a place and a time for me to enjoy them, but I am more of a fan of, you know, really well developed, in-depth characters with a big storyline. Like, those are the things that really hook me. I think sometimes short stories are so short that I don't have time to really care or be invested to the point where when things happen it really packs a punch. There are some authors that manage to do that, but it is hard in a short story. However, I did enjoy these stories, and I think it's because I like Richard Lehman's writing style and his demented, deprived, crazy mind. So I did enjoy the stories, and I really did enjoy the novella as well. So the novella Fiends, it felt like reading a story about a serial killer that was loose on the 70s. We follow a girl named Marty, and she goes to the cinema with her boyfriend when she realizes that she knows someone that is in the same room. And that is William, a man that broke into her house and raped her 10 years ago. Apparently, he's free. He's out of jail, and he is there in the same room, so she freaks out and runs away. It was a very, very intense story, and it kind of depicts the horrors that can happen if you let someone out of jail that is not ready whatsoever to be put back into society, and somebody that it is not mentally well. And some people just need to be behind bars for their whole lives because they cannot control themselves. So this was a very, very intense story. I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed to see William's demise and what happened to him. Now, if you're gonna read Richard Lehman or you want to try it and you are already experienced with horror, I think this is not a bad book to start with because his books tend to be really long, and with this one you're getting a novella and you're getting short stories, so you kind of get an idea of what the author does and how he works, you know, and he writes. But keep in mind that he is very messed up. His stories are absolutely vile and gory and violent. So I would never recommend Richard Lehman to people that are new to horror, but for more experienced people, I would recommend it. Moving on to Odd Spirits by S.T. Gibson, and this book was a breath of fresh air because this is basically more fantasy than anything else, like a story of a love relationship. So it was a very interesting read for me and something that I have not read in some time, so it was a nice change for me. Now, this is the prequel novella to Evocation, which I have not read yet. However, I decided to start with this one because I know that the same characters from here are in Evocation, and this one introduces you to the characters, tells you the backstory, so I feel like reading the novella first hopefully prepares me to meet the characters again in Evocation. We follow Reese and Moira, who are basically a sorcerer and a witch that met, fell in love, and moved in together. However, since they moved in together, they have realized that there is some sort of spirit presence in the house that is making their lives miserable. So they are trying to figure out what is this presence, if somebody invited it in, and how to banish it, obviously. So it is a very interesting book because there's a lot of fantasy in it. There is a little bit of creepiness, you know, just a little bit. And there is a lot about their relationship and how relationships change over time and how hard it is sometimes to fully open up to someone and be your true self around other people. And I really enjoyed to go a little bit deeper into the relationship in this book. And even though it's a novella, honestly, you really get to understand both of them, both of their perspectives in life and love. And I thought it was a very interesting way to tell a love story. I really did enjoy it, so I am super excited to dive into Evocation soon. And I have to because the sequel to Evocation is coming out this year. I think it's coming out very soon, and I have it pre-ordered, so I kind of need to get to that one. Next we have a non-fiction book, and that is The Want Ad Killer by Anne Rule. And this surprisingly has been my first Anne Rule book. You know, her books have been on my list for such a long time, and I finally decided to pick one of them, and I chose this one because, I don't know, it just called me, and because this is the first book that I heard about when I heard the name Anne Rule, so I feel like I had to start with this one. It follows the story of Harry Louis Carrigan, and this is a man that avoided the death penalty based on a, I think, not a technicality, but like an improper procedure that was done. So he was released, and after he was released, he started his reign of terror, murdering young women. It almost seemed like nobody could stop him, and for a long time it was very frustrating to see how this guy was getting away with absolutely everything. This being the first Anne Rule book that I have read, for me has been a really good experience. I like the way that she writes and depicts the story, how she talks about the horrible things that this monster did, but how she also gives a lot of grace and empathy to the victims and what happened to them and how it affected their families and the grief, and it really humanizes the victims and gives them a voice and talks about how unfair everything is that happened to them. This is also the first time that I heard the story of these serial killers, so for me all the information that I got was new, and it was horrifying for me to see how this guy kept doing what he was doing and the police were unable to stop him. Like, at some point people had their suspicions that this was the guy, but they didn't have enough to arrest him, and he kept slipping through their fingers. I was really invested in the story because I wanted to know what happened. I wanted to know if they caught him or not, because like I said, I was not familiar with his story, and I was so invested in this book that I read it fairly quickly. And also after reading this book, I started going back to true crime documentaries and binge watching them because I was just in the mood for that. Obviously the story is horrifying. If you get into this book, you're gonna read a lot of things that are gonna make you so upset, but I like that the author is very blunt about everything that happened and she describes it as it was. She's not trying to sugarcoat anything, but like I said, she does show a lot of compassion for the victims and she does portray him as the monster that he was. I think if you enjoy true crime, you're really going to enjoy this book, and I am obviously going to continue reading more Anne Rule books. And last but not least, we have my favorite read for the month of April, and it was a surprise to me that I love this book so much, and that is The Dead Soul Project by Dan Smith. And this is part of a new series, and I got the arc at YALC last year, and I have been really meaning to read it because everybody said that it was similar to the X-Files, and when I was a teenager I loved X-Files. I loved it so much, so I thought if anything can bring me back to that feeling, that would be amazing. The series is called The Night House Files, and the idea is that in every book there's going to be a file that is going to be basically declassified, and the information is going to be given to you about something that happened. And in this case, we follow a very interesting story that happened back in the 70s. This book tells the story of a very strange occurrence that happened in 1977 in a town block of apartments called Alpine Heights. And the story is very smartly told because you're hearing it from the people that were there experiencing what was going on in the 70s, but you also have mixed media elements. You have basically dossiers, you have interviews of people that were in contact with what happened or that investigated the case back in the 70s and are retelling what they remember in the present time. I really love those bits of like reports and interviews that kind of expand the story, and also going back to the 70s and hear what was going on from the people that were experiencing it back in the day. Basically, what happened was that one day a person that was presumed to be dead returned to the apartment building, moved on with his life as nothing had ever happened. However, he brought something with him into that building, and after that, nobody else was safe. This was very heavy on the sci-fi, but it had many good, gory, and creepy moments, and I absolutely loved it. I am super excited about this series. I think it's great for young readers, and also for people that want to read more horror but maybe are not ready for adult horror. I think this book series is going to be great. It's unexpected, it's violent, it has some twists and turns to the story. It has a very interesting ending as well. That's the best way I can put it without spoiling it. And I loved all the mixed media elements that it had as well. It makes the story so real. And even though this is a short book and it is very hard to have a compelling story and really well developed characters when you don't have so many pages available and you have many characters, the author did manage to make the story compelling. You were tense, you were caring for the characters, you were scared for them, you could not wait to see what would happen next. And I read this one almost in one sitting because I just needed to know. And this is very addictive. So anybody that has heard about the book or was considering getting this book, please do. And if you've never heard the book but you like what you're hearing, I encourage you to pick it up. And the series is continuing this year already in 2025. Book 2 is being released and I'm gonna get that book because I'm really excited. And it's going to be a new case that was classified and now it's being, declassified. Everybody will be able to read it, and I don't know, it just feels realistic, almost as if somebody would really be kind of taking cases from the FBI or whatever and giving you access to it, to the files, and it's great. I love it. So I'm really excited to pick up book 2. Alright guys, so those were the 8 books that I managed to read for Old School April. And as I said, I know it's not much and I did have to cut down on a couple of books because I just did not have the time. But I'm really happy because I did collect a lot of points for my team. Also, I watched movies and things for points as well. So I'm really glad that even though I didn't have much time, I still could get as many points as I could for my team. Also, most of the books that I read, I really enjoyed, and some of them were books that I had on my list for a while, so I'm happy that I finally got to them. Let me know down below if you participated in Old School April, which team you were, and also which is your favorite read from April. Doesn't matter if you participated or not in the readathon. I hope that you enjoyed to hear my thoughts on all the books that I read. Thank you guys as always so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in our next coffee time. Bye!